Sullivan and Helen Keller. The story of Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller is the story of a dedicated teacher and an eager student. The story is very remarkable and inspiring because the teaching was done without sight and without sound. Helen Keller was born in the American state of Alabama in 1880. She was a happy and healthy baby, but before she reached the age of 2, she was struck by a severe fever. As a result of this fever, she became both deaf and blind. After her illness, the young Helen Keller learned to use her other senses. For example, she touched other people's hands to figure out what they were doing. In this way, she also learned that people could communicate by moving their lips. Helen could not talk. Instead, she communicated with her family by making sign movements with her hands and body. However, Helen became very frustrated by her inability to see, hear, and talk. She often became very angry and had many temper tantrums. When Helen Keller was 6 years old, her family took her to see Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, who was an expert on educating deaf children. This man was also famous for inventing the telephone. As a result of this visit, Helen's parents hired a tutor for their daughter. The tutor was a very intelligent deaf woman named Anne Sullivan. At first, it was difficult to teach Helen because she still made many angry outbursts. Gradually, Anne Sullivan gained Helen's trust. One day, Anne began to teach Helen to communicate. Anne took Helen to a well and pumped some water onto Helen's hand. Then Anne used her finger to write the letters W-A-T-E-R onto Helen's hand. By repeating this, Anne was able to teach Helen how to write the word water. As soon as Helen learned that things could be named in this way, she wanted to learn the names of many other objects and actions. She was curious about many things and learned a great number of words. She also learned to read by using the Braille alphabet. This alphabet allows the reader to feel letters and words which are represented by bumps on a page. Also, Helen learned to talk by feeling and then copying the movements of people's mouths. When Helen Keller was 16 years old, Anne Sullivan went with her to college. Anne acted as Helen's interpreter, and Helen was very successful in her studies. After her graduation, Helen dedicated her life to improving conditions for the blind, the deaf, and the poor. Anne Sullivan died in 1936 and was remembered as the miracle worker for a triumph in educating Helen Keller. After Anne's death, Helen continued to give lectures in countries around the world and was active in many political causes. She met with presidents and prime ministers and helped to improve conditions for people who were deaf or blind. At the time of her death in 1968, Helen Keller was one of the most admired people in the world. Modern engineering wonders. During the 20th century, there were great improvements in engineering technology. These new developments allowed the construction of many amazing tunnels, bridges, towers, and office buildings. For centuries, people had dreamed about the possibility of connecting the island of Great Britain to the mainland of Europe. However, it was only in 1994 that such a link was completed when a tunnel was dug under the English Channel between England and France. The Channel Tunnel, also known as the Chunnel, actually consists of 3 separate railway tunnels. These tunnels are about 50 kilometers long. They are located about 150 meters below the bottom of the sea. Obviously, this was an extremely challenging project to undertake. As a result of the tunnel, it is now possible to travel between London and Paris by train. And the trip takes only 3 hours, of which only 20 minutes are spent inside the tunnel. A suspension bridge is a bridge that is supported by strong wires that hang from tall towers. The world's longest suspension bridge is the Akashi Kaiko Bridge near the city of Kobe, Japan. This bridge is nearly 4 kilometers long, and the 2 towers near the middle of the bridge are about 2 kilometers apart. It took almost 20 years to design this bridge and 10 years to build it. This bridge was designed to withstand extremely strong winds because Japan often experiences windstorms called typhoons. The bridge was also designed to withstand powerful earthquakes. earthquakes, which sometimes hit Japan. At the beginning of the 21st century, the world's tallest freestanding tower was the Canadian National Tower, or the CN Tower. The CN Tower is 553 meters tall. It is located in the city of Toronto, within the Canadian province of Ontario. This structure was built in 1975 as a television and radio tower. Before the CN Tower was built, TV and radio reception in the Toronto area was poor. This was because the TV and radio signals were blocked by the buildings of downtown Toronto. When the CN Tower was built, this problem was solved. Of course, the CN Tower is also a famous tourist attraction. People can ride in the very fast elevators that take them to observation areas, which are at about 350 and 450 meters above the ground. Although the CN Tower is the world's tallest tower, it is not an office building. The tallest buildings in the world are the Petronas Towers in the city of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and the Sears Tower in the American city of Chicago. The Sears Tower, which is 442 meters tall, was completed in 1974. It has 110 floors, and its top floor is the highest office floor in the world. However, the Petronas Towers reach slightly higher, to a height of 452 meters. The Petronas Towers were completed in 1998. Obviously, the late 20th century witnessed some amazing achievements of engineering. It will be very interesting to see what new wonders will be constructed in the 21st century. The Protestant Reformation. Until about 500 years ago, there was only one Christian church in Western and Central Europe. People from Portugal to Poland all belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. However, soon after the year 1500, people in many parts of Europe broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and began their own churches instead. This was known as the Protestant Reformation. The leader of the early Protestant movement was a German theologian named Martin Luther. Luther believed that many of the priests of the Roman Catholic Church had become too concerned about wealth and luxury. Also, he disapproved of some practices in the church. One such practice was that priests allowed people to pay money to the church in exchange for committing various sins. Luther believed that it was wrong to allow people to buy the freedom to commit acts that were against the teachings of the church. Luther began to criticize the Roman Catholic Church in public, and he refused to acknowledge the authority of the church. He said that instead he would follow the teachings of the Bible as he understood them. The officials of the church declared that Luther was a heretic. However, the local German rulers did not punish Luther. Many of them resented the power of the church and welcomed his ideas. Luther and other Protestant leaders disagreed with the church on several important issues. The Protestants believed that priests should be allowed to marry, whereas the Roman Catholic Church believed that priests should remain celibate. The Protestants believed that people should read the Bible for themselves, whereas the Roman Catholic Church believed that priests should interpret the Bible for the people. During the decades that followed Luther, the Protestant movement spread throughout much of Europe. Over time, many different Protestant churches were formed. During this period, many wars were fought between local rulers who favored Protestantism and other local rulers who supported the Roman Catholic Church. In the end, many parts of Europe became Protestant, such as Scandinavia, England, and parts of Germany, Holland, and Switzerland. However, the people and rulers of many other areas of Europe preferred to remain in the Roman Catholic Church. These areas included most of southern Europe as well as Poland and Ireland. The Roman Catholic Church changed a few of its practices in response to Protestant criticism, but kept its most important beliefs. In recent times, relations between the Roman Catholic Church and the various Protestant churches have become much more friendly. Some discussions have been held between Catholic and Protestant officials in order to resolve some of their disagreements.